In this video, we are going to discuss how to play the Scotch opening or Scotch game with the white pieces. It is a very interesting and a basic opening that must be known by every chess player. I received a comment on my previous videos to make a video on the Scotch game, so I decided why not, let's do it. So yeah, without wasting any further time, let's begin. So, white starts with 1 e4, controlling the center. Black does the same, e5, and now we play knight to f3, attacking the pawn, knight to c6. This position is universal position. I believe everyone, even a complete beginner, knows this position. So here white is having many options. White can play bishop c4, the Italian. White can play bishop to b5, the Roy Lopez opening. Some other ways are to play something like c3, going for the d4 stuff, trying to control the center, as that is the basic fundamental of chess. But in the Scotch game, we play the move d4, pushing the pawn, trying to grab the space immediately. So basically what happens, you're trying to open up both of your bishops and you're trying to challenge the center. So for example, after d4, the main move is to capture the pawn. But for example, if black goes for trying to protect this pawn by playing something like d6. Now already this is not the best way to do play the position. Now there are many ways for white to continue the possession. You can play the move d5, grabbing more space. You're having more space in the center, which is already a good thing. You can put your pawn on c4 and the game goes. Another way here is you can simply take on e5. After takes, you can simply trade off the queen and you can break black's castling rights, which is a very good thing to continue the possession. Or you can even play something like bishop b5, simply developing the pieces. So the main move here is to simply take on d4, and now white can go for playing some gambits which are very aggressive via c3 or bishop c4. There are two ways to continue playing in a gambit way, but the main move which is played in the high level is to take on d4 with the knight. And after knight d4, now there are multiple ways for black to continue the possession. The most natural is to play the move knight to f6. Another way is to play the move bishop to c5. We are going to look what happens if black goes for capturing the knight. If black plays something like queen h4, which is a very interesting sideline. So first, starting with what happens if black takes the knight. We capture the knight with the queen, and it looks like we should not try to develop our queen early in the opening because it can be a target, but in this particular position the queen cannot be a target and white is having a complete control in the center with the queen and the pawn. And if black tries to attack the white queen by playing c5, you will notice now the black bishop is stuck. The d pawn is a backward pawn because whenever black will try to push the pawn, we will simply capture it. Okay, so this is already a bad position for black, as you can also see the bar. So here, capturing the knight is a bad move because white gets the complete control in the center. So if black plays something like bishop to c5, first let's check bishop c5. Now white is having many ways. So first of all, if white can play the move knight to b3, attacking the bishop, white can even go for capturing the knight on c6, but then it allows queen f6, which is a very interesting move. Basically, it attacks the knight and it also threatens mate in 1. So basically, eventually, black gets the knight back and black is absolutely fine. So that is why I believe the main move in the position is to play bishop e3. Why? We are basically focusing on developing all our pieces at the place of moving the same piece twice. So bishop e3 protects the knight. And now, once again, black has two moves. So basically, what is the idea of white? White's idea is to capture the knight on c6, because then the queen is attacked. So black has to recapture the knight, and then we can simply capture the bishop on c5. So there are already some basic tactics available in the position. So for example, if black plays queen to f6, developing the queen, what is the idea? The idea here is, for example, if white goes for capturing the knight in the position, black can go for capturing the bishop, threatening mate in 1. White has to recapture, and now black can capture with the d pawn, and you will notice white is having weak pawns in the center, isolated pawns. The b2 pawn is attacked. White king is already a bit weak, and black is feeling pretty happy. So capturing the knight is already a mistake. So now once again white has options in the position. White can play the move knight to b5, which is a very aggressive option and a very complicated option, attacking the c7 pawn, attacking the king and the rook, or white can simply play the move c3, which I believe is the main move. So first of all, discussing what happens if knight b5, because it is a very complicated line and it is very interesting at the same time. Basically, bishop e3, we have to capture the bishop, it's a check, we push g3 attacking the queen, and now black goes back with the queen, because if black goes for capturing the pawn, which is also fine, but that's a very complicated line. White captures the pawn, black captures the rook, it's a check, anything can happen. I believe if you are a beginner, stay away from it. So here c3 is the main move. After c3, knight to e7, bishop to c4. Okay, so basically after knight e7, black's idea is to play the move d5. And after c3, we defend the knight. So we need to stop d5. So white plays the move bishop to c4, stopping d5 and also developing the piece. Black castles, we castle as well. And now black has options available in the position. If black goes back with the bishop, basically protecting the bishop, now we can develop the knight on e3. If we try to develop the knight on d2, you will see now there is triple attack and black can already win a pawn in the end by capturing everything on d4. So that is why we first develop our knight to a3. What is the idea? The idea here is to pull the bishop back to b3 and put the knight to the c4 square, which is actually one of the best square for the knight. So black tries to push the pawn to d6 with the idea of developing the final piece, the bishop on c8. And now white is having available options, two options majorly. White can play queen d2 and get his final piece into the game, or white can simply pull back the bishop and develop the knight on c4, the best square for the knight. So yeah, that's exactly what happens after bishop b6. If black goes for playing the move b6, which is also one of the lines played by grandmasters, developing the bishop via b7. You can go with the same idea of queen d2, maybe even f4, grabbing more space in the center with the ideas of e5, expanding on the king side. Could be an idea. If black plays the most natural looking move, which is d6, protecting the bishop and also trying to open up the light square bishop. Now, I believe this is not the best way to play, because now you will see white can simply take the knight on c6. And here, as you have played d6, the queen cannot capture the knight. Because in the previous line, in this position, if I try to capture the knight, the queen will capture it. And if I try to capture the bishop, the queen will capture the bishop. But after d6, I can capture the knight. Black has to capture it back, and now I can capture the bishop. And now the black pawn is forced to capture the bishop, and you will see black has lost his central control. So which allows us to play the move f4, grabbing even more space. And you will see white is already feeling pretty happy. Black is having double pawns, white is having already more space on the king side, and it is much easier to play with the white pieces, and white is feeling already pretty happy in the position. So that's exactly what happens if black plays queen to f6. Now discussing what happens if black goes simply back with the bishop b6, and because now the bishop is protected, if we take, black can take. So basically after bishop b6, now we can simply play knight to f5. A normal way to continue the position is we can even play knight to c3 or bishop c4, simply developing the pieces. But knight f5 is actually a very interesting move. Basically it attacks the g7 pawn, and if black captures the bishop, we can capture back with the knight. So bishop e3 is the main move. We capture with the knight. Knight to f6, developing the knight, attacking the pawn. We develop the knight. Black castles, and now queen to d2. You see, we do not develop a bishop and do a short castle, but actually queen d2 is a very interesting way to play. We castle long with the idea of attacking on the king side, which is a very interesting option. So for example, after rook e8, attacking the pawn two times, so we have to defend the pawn via f3. Black plays d6 with the idea of developing the bishop. We do a long castle. And you guys can see the arrow. This is the idea. Black is aiming for a queen side attack. We are aiming for a king side attack. And actually, white is much faster in the race because our attack will reach early to the black king. And white is actually pretty comfortable in the position with absolutely no problem. And I believe this is a very fun position to play with the white pieces, especially. So going back, that's exactly what happens if black plays bishop to c5. Now coming to the main move, what happens if black simply develops the knight to f6, attacking the pawn. If we play something like knight to c3, it allows black to play bishop b4, pinning up the knight and also threatening to capture the pawn. We don't really want to go into these types of line which can be irritating for us. Instead, we can first take the knight. Black have to capture with the b pawn because if black captures with the d pawn, we can trade off the queens and we can remove black's castling right, and we are pretty comfortable over there. So black have to capture with the b pawn, and now a common way to continue the position is playing bishop d3. But I believe after bishop d3, it allows black to play the move d5, striking in the center, and now you will see black's all pieces are getting opened up with absolutely no problem, and I believe black is pretty comfortable in this particular area. So we don't really want to play bishop d3. We can play the move e5, which is a very aggressive and an interesting option, striking the knight immediately. The knight have to move. We can play the move c4, attacking the knight once again. The knight goes back, and now we play the move bishop to d3. And you will see this is a much better position because our pawns has already been advanced, our bishop is opened up, we can castle up, even play f4, and we are feeling pretty happy. So going back a bit, in this position, black can actually play the move queen to e7, basically pinning up this knight. We cannot capture the knight. And here, white have to play the move queen e2, or else black, if we try to defend it with the pawn, black can play d6, exerting more pressure on the pawn. So queen e2, and you will see blacks and whites, both bishops are blocked. So after queen e2, black have to move the knight. We play c4, and now there are two options. Black can simply go back with the knight, which is fine, but another way is to play the move bishop a6, which is a very interesting move. We cannot capture the knight because the queen is hanging. So now we can play the move b3, which is the main move. We can also develop the knight to protect the pawn, but b3 is the standard way to play. What is the idea? After b3, we not only protect the pawn, we open up our dark square bishop to maybe a3, attacking the queen, or maybe just to put the bishop on b2. So after b3, black plays g6 with the idea of developing the final piece. We can play the move g3. Basically, there are two options. You can play bishop a3, or you can even play the move g3. If white plays bishop a3, developing the bishop, knight to b4. Because if black moves the queen, we can capture the bishop and we are super happy. So knight b4. Like, it is usually recommended not to pin your own pieces, but this case is special. Nothing is happening. Black is absolutely fine. Bishop g7 is coming in. For example, g3, check. Okay, g3, and the position is very interesting because black can give a check with the knight. We have to take, and now queen takes pawn. That's a interesting way to play. It's a check and the rook is also attacked. So we can play queen e2, forcing a queen trade, and now you have to take with the king. Why? You will see the reason. It's a very deep logic. After king takes, black can play bishop g7, attacking the rook. So to protect the rook, you have to sacrifice your knight by playing knight to c3. And after bishop to c3, if your king would have been on e1, it would have been a check and black would have captured the rook. But in this position, as you have captured with the king, now you can move the rook, controlling the center, short castle, white can play king d3, bishop g2, get his final rook into the game, and that's how we continue the position. So that's exactly how you can play via bishop a3, which is a fine way to play. But I believe a more convenient way is to play the move g3, allowing black to develop the bishop. We develop the bishop to b2, protecting the pawn. Black castle, we develop the bishop. Black gets the final piece, like all the pieces are in the game now. We short castle. and now allowing black to capture the pawn in the center, which is once again a very interesting line. We capture the bishop, takes, and you will see black is a pawn up. But now we capture the knight, allowing the opponent to basically we are giving up the rook for two minor pieces. Takes, king takes, pawn takes, knight to c3, attacking the pawn. If black pushes the pawn, we are going to have an open bishop. So black will try to play c6, trying to limit this bishop. But after c6, the position is already very interesting to continue. We can develop our rook to d1 with the idea of rook d4, rook a4, exerting pressure. We can put our bishop on f3, controlling this particular e2 square, not allowing the opponent to enter with his rooks. And black's idea is generally to put develop the rook to e8, get the king over here, and trying to protect everything. Maybe at the same time, trying to push the pawn at the right time. So that's how the position goes. So going back, that's exactly what happens if black plays queen e7. And even going back, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays knight to f6. Now discussing the final approach, what happens if black plays queen to h4, which is a very interesting way to play. What is the idea? So basically black attacks the pawn in the center. So here, you can play knight to c3. Black plays bishop to b4. Idea is to simply capture the pawn because knight cannot capture the queen because the knight is pinned. So a way to continue the position is to put your queen to d3, protecting everything. But I believe that's not the fundamental way to play. Bishop e2 is rather more interesting, allowing the opponent to capture the center pawn, and now simply playing the move knight to b5. You see, black has captured the pawn, and now the c7 pawn is a weak pawn. We can actually put our knight to b5, attacking the pawn. So here, black is having two options. If black, first of all, goes for capturing the knight, giving a check, we capture with the pawn, and now, once again, the threat is to capture the pawn, and black is not really having any convenient way but to play the move king d8 to protect the pawn. That's the only way. And after king d8, this is actually fine, but now after short castle, I believe engine says it's fine, it's slightly better for white, but practically speaking, it's already very much happy position for white. White is having the bishop pair, white is having the lead in development, white king is already safe, whereas black pieces has not yet been developed, the king is weak, and whatnot. So white is feeling already pretty happy in the position. So going back, that's exactly what happens if black captures the knight. If black plays queen into g2, capturing the pawn, attacking the rook, bishop f3, attacking the queen and also protecting the rook. And now basically it doesn't matter whatever black does, we are going to capture this pawn and I'm going to capture the rook with a completely winning position. So that's how we play the Scotch game. That's how we play the Scotch opening. I believe I have covered everything. I have covered knight to f6, I have covered bishop to c5, even queen h4, and why we should not take on d4. So this is how, but basically this is the complete introduction about the Scotch opening or the Scotch game, how you can play it, and yeah, you can just watch some games of top grandmasters and get even better at this particular opening. I have given you a complete introduction. So yeah, that's it. So if you loved the analysis, if you loved the introduction of the Scotch game, you guys can like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, and if you want any particular video on any particular topic, you can tell me in the comments and I can come up with that particular video. So it was fun to make this particular video. So yeah, so I'm going to see you with more videos like this. So yeah, till then stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess. Bye bye.